I remember when I started secondary school and when I looked at the timetable, all the male teachers' names were written with Mr. and all the female teachers' names were written with Ms. MS. And then we were all asking what that means because in primary school, all of our female teachers went by Miss or Mrs. And we knew what that meant. That meant they were either married or unmarried. And we were told that, oh, it's because of the evil patriarchy, because men were horrible to women and unequal and trying to keep them down. So then they established this to make it equal. Because men are always Mr., whether they're married or unmarried, so they decided to make that equal. And we thought at the time, okay, fair enough. And I didn't really think anything of it. Many years later, I read Pride and Prejudice, which is set in a world, a very formal world, where all the men are expected to do the approaching. And then I realized that this whole Miss and Mrs. thing wasn't evil. It wasn't the patriarchy trying to keep women down. It was simply a result of men being expected to do all the approaching, so then they need to know whether women are married or unmarried. It was simple as that. It wasn't evil. So the story we were told, oh, this whole evil patriarchy thing, it turned out it was a lie. It was a lie. Another thing, constantly, pretty much from day one, the idea of women being pregnant is presented as this evil, evil thing. Like, my God, like, it's the people who push this, it's like they're angry with God himself for inventing this thing called pregnancy. It's presented as an unmitigated evil to girls, and the idea of being pregnant is made to look like the worst thing in the world, to the point where girls are running towards abortion or anything just to get away from this idea of pregnancy. And that's the narrative we were given, school, the media, everywhere. And I remember I was in my early 20s and I was working in an office. And at one point I was at a desk that was right near the kind of kitchen area where you could hear people chatting as they're making their coffee. And one day these two women, one of them was pregnant at the time, was going on about how much she loved being pregnant. And I thought, that's not something we've heard before. And it turns out that women who are pregnant do like being pregnant. Pretty much that's how it goes. I remember a few years ago, I saw this woman on Instagram posting about how much she liked being pregnant. And then she just got mobbed by feminists who are saying, you know, you're evil, you're patriarchal, why are you saying this? And all she was saying was positive things about her own experience. So that gets us to another thing, which is the control of language, the control of what you can and can't say. Because these people, they've got this kind of story that they want everyone to think and believe in, this evil patriarchy that apparently existed and kept women down. And every time somebody says something that kind of goes against that narrative, their language gets controlled. All of a sudden, oh, you can't say that. So women who enjoy the feeling of being pregnant, the kind of purpose that gives their life, all of a sudden they're being silenced. So now you only hear one side of the story. When you only hear one side of the story, that's what you're going to believe. And we see this time and time again. Another one is, why weren't women playing much sports 100 years ago? Well, maybe they didn't want to. Maybe it was that simple. But no, if you've got this idea that you want to control women, control girls, and manipulate them into joining sports where maybe they don't want to deep down, then this is exactly how you would do it. You would say, oh, look, 100 years ago, the evil patriarchy, all these selfish, male chauvinist men kept women down and didn't let them play football, and now you have the opportunity to play football that was worked hard for by all these feminists. Are you really going to waste all of their hard work? And then, of course, women and girls are manipulated into doing things they don't want to do. Whatever happened to free choice? It looks like all of these narratives are based on people telling you things that aren't actually true, and then silencing the opposition so that you only hear one side of it. Another thing that slowly woke me up out of this little Plato's cave was a TV show that the BBC showed back in 2009, only ever shown once and then never shown again. It was a simple family show where they got a family to go out and live in a tropical kind of island situation for 3 weeks. And they were put in a survival situation, and it was called The Real Swiss Family Robinson, by the way. You can look it up and watch it. And they were put in this survival situation, and very quickly, very naturally, their natural instincts came back. The men would go out and hunt and fish because they just felt like that's what they wanted to do. The women would go around foraging and taking care of the little babies, and that's what they wanted to do. And the transformation you saw in these people. So in this country, it was a UK-based show, UK families. In this country where everything is equal, the women looked very grey and the men were very weak and wimpy. And as soon as they were taken out into that real life kind of nature survival situation, the men, the boys, they came into their own, and all of a sudden they were strong and confident and masculine, and the women loved that in them. They were surprised, but they did. They really loved it. And the transformation in the women, going from these grey, kind of frumpy, dowdy creatures because they've been forced to be equal with men, transformed in the sunshine, in the tropical sunshine, and all of a sudden, of course, it wasn't just the tropical sunshine, it was the fact that they were in a feminine mode, doing feminine things. And yeah, all of a sudden they were glowing. They were glowing. They had flowers in their hair and they loved doing feminine things. And in the show, they actually commented on this. They said, if you told me that, you know, as a woman, I should stay behind and do all of these girly things, I would have rebelled against it. But here it feels like the most natural thing in the world. So this show, it shows people in this kind of Eden state, an Edenic state, like the Garden of Eden, where they were allowed to revert back to their natural instincts and their factory settings, and everything was wonderful. It was amazing. I really loved this show, and I made sure I showed my nieces and nephews this show every once in a while so that they realize that there's more to life than equality, that men and women don't have to be identical all the time. And who wants that? Like, who wants a world where everything is the same and dull and grey? Isn't that intensely boring? Like, in your own marriages, don't you want the man to be more masculine and the woman to be more feminine? You've been told not to want that. You've been told that it's evil to want that. But who said? Like, it's your life, you get to choose, right? So what if you choose that in your marriage, you want the man to be masculine and the woman to be feminine? What's wrong with that? And then there's this other thing about everything has to be 50-50. Like, the man has to do 50% of the breadwinning and the woman has to do 50% of the money making. And then at home, they have to do 50-50 of everything. Like, what do you think that is going to do to the polarity between you? What do you think that is going to do to your attraction over time? Well, it's going to disappear. It's going to disappear. And this is the real reason why divorce rates have been going up in the latter half of the 20th century. They keep saying things like, oh, it's because women have more freedom now. Well, that's part of it, and that's not necessarily a good thing either. But the real reason, the main and the biggest reason, is that attraction diminishes between men and women when there's no polarity between them. So in some way, shape and form, the man has to be masculine. Whether that's taking charge or taking some kind of leadership role, there always has to be a bit of a power dynamic. Like, there always has to be a bit of a power dynamic. This is why women love watching all of these ballroom dancing shows, because in ballroom dancing, the man takes charge. And that's what everybody wants. That's what men want. That's what women want. But you're not allowed to say that because you're this evil, domineering, patriarchal, chauvinist pig if you want to take charge. But that is a man's natural instinct. So what's wrong with that? I saw this dash cam video of, it was taken from a parked car and it was right next to the pavement. And this woman was on her phone and she absent-mindedly drifted into the road without checking to see if there was a car coming. And she was almost hit by a car. But she was saved by this young man dressed in a t-shirt, didn't look like the kind of masculine figure that you'd normally imagine. But when he saw the woman was going to get hit by a car, he forgot himself and he forgot all the cultural conditioning, and his raw instincts took over and he grabbed the woman. So he didn't have time to second guess himself. He didn't have time to think, oh no, what if she makes a complaint against me? Oh no, what if she misunderstands my intentions, or any of that? He didn't have time to think of that, so instincts took over. He grabbed the woman and just pulled her back onto the pavement within a fraction of a second. And then both of them kind of came to their senses, and then she realized what happened, and she's like gradually thanking him for what he did. But the young man, after his instincts had kicked in, and after he'd just saved this woman's life, suddenly reverted to all of the conditioning again. And he did this with his hands. He was like, oh my God, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to touch you. And he went like that. And I was just like, wouldn't it be great if all of us could just stay in that instinctual state at all times? Like, if men could just be naturally masculine and women could be naturally feminine. It's what everybody wants deep down. It's what women want. It's what men want. But all of these people have got in the way now. All of these feminists have been telling women, you should want what we tell you to want. And they've been telling boys, men, anything you do that is remotely masculine or natural is in some way bad. It's either toxic or it's old fashioned or it's outdated or it's sexist. It's just, you name it, like they've got every kind of label for just pure natural masculinity. And I think that needs to end now. And I think we need to give ourselves permission, both men and women, to be naturally masculine and naturally feminine again.